Hi everyone. Sorry that we haven't been able to get on meets together. I'm having technical difficulties, and it seems like um, it's gonna keep happening for a while. Um, we'll see. Okay. Well, I'm gonna read the next chapter in our book. Leroy Ninker saddles up. If you recall, the last time we were reading together, Leroy was trying to get Maybelline, his new old horse, into his apartment. So let's see what happens now. Chapter 5. Leroy Ninker went into the kitchen of Unit 12. He opened the refrigerator and looked inside. Leroy had viewed many, many westerns at the Bijou Drive-In Theater. He had seen a great deal of purple mountains and wide open plains. He had watched cowboys battling injustices and crossing rivers and eating beans. But he could not recall one movie where a cowboy said aloud exactly what it was that he was feeding to his horse. "Hay?" said Leroy. He lifted up his hat and scratched his head. "Oats?" But he didn't have any hay, and he didn't have any oats. This is what he had. So there's some milk, and maybe some orange juice, and it looks like pickles and butter and salad dressing. But that doesn't really sound like things horses eat, right? "Dag flibberet," said Leroy Ninker. Outside of Unit 12, Maybelline let out a long, long whinny that had a question mark on the end of it. "Okay," Leroy shouted to the horse. "I am making you some grub. Yippee-i-o." And grub's another word for food. Leroy grabbed a big pot and filled it with water. He turned the heat on high. He filled another pot with tomato sauce. Patty Lamarck had said nothing about whether or not Maybelline liked spaghetti. But didn't everyone like spaghetti? After Leroy Ninker added the noodles to the pot, he went outside and leaned up against his horse. Her flank was very warm. She was an extremely comforting horse to lean against. Maybelline turned her head and looked at Leroy, and then she put her nose up in the air and sniffed. "That's right," said Leroy. "I am cooking you some grub." Maybelline whinnied. "It's spaghetti," said Leroy. "I hope you like spaghetti." It turned out that Maybelline did like spaghetti. She liked a lot of spaghetti. It's a pretty silly picture, right? The horse ate the first pot of noodles in a single gigantic gulp. As far as Leroy could tell, she didn't even bother to chew. When she was done, Maybelline lifted her head from the pot and looked at Leroy in a meaningful way. Leroy said, "Yippee-i-o," and he went running back into Unit 12 with the empty pot and started boiling more water. He opened another jar of tomato sauce. He made a second pot of spaghetti. After that, he made a third pot of spaghetti. By the time Maybelline was done eating, the stars were shining in the sky, and the moon was looking down, and there was not one noodle of spaghetti left in Unit 12. Leroy Ninker was very tired. He leaned against his horse and looked up at the stars. But when he closed his eyes, what he saw was Patty Lamarck. Her face was as big as the moon, and her mouth was opening and closing and opening and closing. Leroy knew exactly what she was saying. Patty Lamarck was reciting item 3. "Maybelline?" said Leroy. Maybelline turned and put her nose in Leroy's face. "I have remembered item 3, said Leroy Ninker. "Item 3 is that you are the kind of horse who gets lonesome quick." Maybelline nickered. "But you cannot fit inside Unit 12, said Leroy. Maybelline shook her head. "Okay then," said Leroy. "I will stay here with you." He took off his boots, he removed his lasso, he loosened his belt, and then he lay down at Maybelline's feet. He put his hat over his eyes. He sighed a happy sigh. I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, said Leroy Ninker from underneath his hat. I have done some things that I wish I had not done. I have taken some wrong turns. There was a long silence. Leroy moved his hat and looked up at Maybelline. The horse looked down at him. She was listening. There was a time in my life when I was a thief, said Leroy. I am now reformed. That means he knows that that's not a good thing to do, and he doesn't do that anymore. And here's the illustration. I hope you don't judge me, Maybelline, because I truly am a changed man. Maybelline let out a small chuff of air. Oh, Maybelline, said Leroy, you are my horse. For me, you shine brighter than every star and every planet. You shine brighter than all the universe's moons and suns. There are not enough yippee-i-os to describe you, Maybelline. I love you. Leroy Ninker had never imagined that he could string so many words together at once. It was the longest speech of his life. He looked up at Maybelline, and she looked down at him. Leroy's cheeks felt hot. He lowered his hat so that it covered his face. Good night, Maybelline, he whispered. Leroy closed his eyes. He thought very hard. Had his heart been waiting for Maybelline to come along so it could open up wide and he could speak all the beautiful words that had been hiding inside of him? It was an amazing concept to consider, and the cowboy fell asleep considering it. And that will lead us to chapter 6. So, in that chapter, Leroy fed Maybelline. What did Leroy feed Maybelline? Good. He fed Maybelline spaghetti. He boiled noodles and used a jar of tomato sauce. And Maybelline really, really liked it. And she ate and ate and ate. She probably ate so much spaghetti because she was probably hungry. And by the time she finished eating, there were stars in the sky and the moon was out. What does that mean? When there are stars in the sky and the moon is out, it's not daytime any longer. It is night. Good. They're telling us that time has passed. The author, Kate Dicamillo, is letting us know that the time has passed in the day. That by the time Maybelline finished eating, the stars were out and the moon was out. So that's a nice way of telling us that it's later in the day now. And then Leroy thought about what to do with Maybelline, and he remembered rule number 3. Maybelline gets very lonesome. So instead of Leroy leaving Maybelline outside by herself, he decided to unbuckle his belt and put his hat on top of his head, on top of his face. So the author is telling us that Leroy is getting ready to go to sleep. Good. When we go to sleep, we get comfortable, right? And it's very hard to sleep with a hat on your head. And we know that from the story Cats for Sale. Do you remember that story? With the peddler and its monkeys? Good. So Leroy said some very sweet things to Maybelline. He wasn't trying to make her do anything. He was just saying the kind things because it's what he felt. And he's letting us know that he loves Maybelline now. And if you have a pet, you kind of understand what that love feels like, right? They just make you so happy. They don't even have to do anything, but just having them around makes you feel better inside. And some people can make you feel like that too, but especially a pet, like a dog or a cat. Most people don't have horses, especially if you live in an apartment. Okay, so a lot of you turned in your assignment, which I'm really proud because your assignments were fantastic. And I'm going to pull them up. I posted Noah's assignment on Class Dojo because he was the first one who finished and his work was excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up so we can look at it a little bit. So this is what it was. I don't know if you can see it that well. Okay. Maybe if I turn it to the side. So the writing assignment was, after you watch the dojo video, to brainstorm about some things that are really important to you, that are really special, something that happened. And Noah chose going to karate, a trip to Wisconsin, reading to his little baby brother Vinny, Batman stories, catching bugs, and when he got his bearded dragon. So these are all important events, important things that happen in Noah's life. When he brainstormed his 6 ideas, those are the things that he came up with. And I really like how Noah used his sounds to spell his words, and he drew illustrations, he drew pictures to go with each one. So today, what I want you to do for your writing assignment is I want you to look again at your brainstorming list, and I want you to pick one of your ideas that you want to write about. So think carefully over which one of these you're going to write about, because you're going to write a personal narrative. Remember, like the YouTube video talked about, a story about yourself, a story about something that happened to you. And the way that you're going to write it is that you're going to make sure you look at your journal rubric to make sure you're following all of the kindergarten rules, right? Finger spaces, uppercase letters, periods, drawing, coloring, sounding out words, and being able to read the words that you wrote. Okay. You can add a lot of detail. So for example, if Noah picked catching bugs to write about, the title of his personal narrative would be Catching Bugs. And then Noah might write, I like to catch bugs. It is fun to catch bugs. One day I went outside to catch bugs. I had a jar and a net, and my mom and my brother were with me. And you could keep writing sentences that tell the story of the idea that you want to write about, including details like, the sun was shining bright when I went outside, or the grass was tickling my legs. When you add details like that, the person who is reading your story can really get an idea in their head of the place that you're talking about. Even though we weren't there, we can understand by the details that you choose to use. Okay? So I think that this is going to be your first draft. And when we're writing, a lot of times we write something and then we go back and we fix it. And we add more things or we take some things out. Because writing is a process. That means that it takes time and you have things that you have to do to it. Like you have to read it again, read it to someone else, get some ideas, fix some spelling or uppercase letters. So your first draft means it's going to be your first try. So I want everybody to pick one idea from their brainstorm list and write about 8 sentences about your idea that you chose, okay? Please don't forget to send an illustration. The illustrations are very important, grown-ups. At this age, the students are still using drawings to represent their ideas. And sometimes through drawings, students will include details that they didn't necessarily include in their writing. And drawing will kind of bring up the ideas. Okay, I would like this to be due, what's today? Wednesday. I'm going to give you 2 days to do this, okay? And then I would like you to turn it in on Friday. Okay, well, I will talk to you soon. I'll be available on Class Dojo. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Don't forget to do your Lexia and your RAS kids and your mathletics. I'll talk to everybody later. Bye.